Hey guys, welcome back. This is going to be a project video, and this is one of our more popular requests. People have been asking for a while now for us to do a companion pack project video type thing on the Apple Watch Band, making those out of leather. I've resisted it for quite some time just because that's not an item that I make, and I haven't ever made one, and so I didn't want to kind of get into a realm of something that I didn't really know what I was doing, and I really don't have time to take a lot of orders on those. In fact, I turn all the watch band orders down and try to send them out to you guys that are already doing them, just because I don't have the bandwidth or the space in my schedule to create a lot of those. And it finally got to the point to where we thought, you know, we need to go ahead and do that and create that video. And so we're going to try our hand at making an Apple Watch Band. I'm not an expert watch band maker by any means. It's still going to be something that I will probably not take many orders on. So I'm hoping that it'll help you guys so that y'all can grab up all the orders that are out there of people that are wanting really neat and different watch bands for their Apple Watches. So that's what we're going to do in this video. We're going to go ahead and get started. As you already saw, we've already got our adapters. Those are something that you're going to have to buy. I found them on Amazon. They were, I can't remember what they were, but I think they were under $10, like $5 or something. I can't remember. But it came with two of the little adapters. They slide in. They've got a little bar hanger that you can put it on there, and you'll see that in the video. So we're going to show you how to make a few different styles of these. They're not all going to be the same. There will be a companion pack. There'll be a number of tooling patterns in there and different styles. All your cut pieces, everything will be in there so that you can make these. So the sizing can be an issue, but from what I've researched, there's a small medium and a medium large, and that's pretty much the two sizes that Apple deals with. And so I found that that's pretty close. We have the patterns that I created. I kind of ran off of my own wrist to try to figure out the best way to get the buckle centered in the middle, because especially with the athletic band that comes with the watch, there's quite a bit of overlap in there, and the way it connects, it'll kind of throw your measurements off. And so we'll try to be real clear on that in the video as well as in the companion pack, so that if you need to adjust it for a person's different size wrist or something, that you can kind of extrapolate and make those adjustments as necessary so that the watch band will fit correctly. But when I'm wearing it, I like for that buckle to be kind of dead center of my wrist, and that way it looks proportional and everything, and the buckle's not on the side of my hand. So that's kind of what we aim for. So that's enough of that. Let's get started, and we'll kind of dive into making these watch bands. So the first watch band that we're going to create is, we're going to do 3 different watch bands in this video, and you'll get patterns for all 3 of those. We're going to do 2 that are just like the normal band, watch band like you see, and then we'll do 1 that's a cuff style, and we'll see how those go. This is going to be the first one, which is going to be very simple, much like you see everybody else make, which is just the body piece, liner, stitch it, edge it, slick it, all that kind of stuff. And pretty simple, fast. It makes a really decent little watch band. Then the second one that we'll do, we're going to do it the same as this, but it's going to be a little more complicated, where we're going to have rolled edges on there and a filler piece in here, which gives the watch band a little bit more body, and you'll see that. And then the next style that we do after that will be the cuff style, and yeah, you'll get to see that. This one's going to be very easy as well, and a lot of room to tool. But those will be the 3 styles that we're going to make. And the first one we're going to start out with is going to be this one here, which is just the plain one. Alright, so here we've got some 5/6 ounce Herman oak, and we're going to go ahead and cut out the bodies of the simple lined watch band. And so like I said, this one will be, we're going to go ahead and cut all the parts for all the watch pieces, and we'll get them all tooled and all dyed, and then we'll assemble each one individually in this video. And so you could definitely do this at a 4 ounce if you want a little lighter weight watch band, or you can do it at a closer to 6. Just kind of be mindful of how heavy it is. Now this right here is some 2/3 ounce Herman oak liner, and like I said, you could probably get away with 3/4 or something like that on there if you needed to. And now we're going to go ahead and prep the top pieces or the body pieces for tooling. I'm just using blue painter's tape, much easier and quicker to prep and tool, and it'll keep that from stretching as we tool our pattern on there. Now we'll cut out the rolled edge piece. Now the liners on this are going to be, all the pieces are basically going to be out of the same size, same thickness, and so we're using that 2-3 ounce. It's probably closer to a 3, that side there. Honestly, it was a little bit heavier, so you're going to kind of have to judge and maybe make 1 or 2 and kind of see how the weight ends up, because you're going to have 3. You're going to have the liner, which rolls over itself, plus the inner piece, and then as well as the top piece. So you've got a lot of things going on there, so you definitely don't want anything too thick, and plus we want the rolled edges to roll over nicely and make a really clean little flat, thinner, but with some body type of watch band. So I would suggest, like I said, around that 3 ounce, 2.5 to 3 ounce weight should work perfect for all the pieces of this. And now when you cut these out, just try to cut them out as true as you can. The liner's not so particular, but whenever it comes to the outer piece or the body pieces of any of these, you want to be sure and try to cut those out as evenly as possible. Okay, so now here I'm using a number 5 hole punch, and that's just to punch those corners. Anytime you've got a little corner like that, it's much better on to punch a little hole in that corner and then cut out from there. That'll just kind of keep those corners from tearing. I don't care how good you are with your knife, a lot of times cutting that corner, you're going to nick it, and it can start to tear right there over time. And here we're just marking where the filler piece is going to be, and so I like to just use an awl and just kind of poke holes right there on my line, and that way I can trace those off, as you can see. And that'll just give us placement on where we need to skive when we get to that, and also where the filler piece is going to go. And so here's our outer pieces, and we'll go ahead and prep those with some blue painter's tape, because those are the pieces that we'll be tooling. And so we don't want them to stretch at all, because they have to fit our liners. Once we roll those edges, they're going to have to fit that. And now here is the cuff. And as you can see, I've got some slot punches or bag punches there and a big square hole. And that hole is for the watch face, because the sensors are on the back and they've got to have contact with your skin. That way they can read all the information they need for tracing your steps and, you know, your heart rate and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to just cut a big hole, a square hole there, to where that back side of the watch face has contact with your wrist when you're wearing it. And then these are the little hangers. You'll see how these work as far as for holding the watch face to the cuff. But I think they're really simple, and they work really easy to be able to change the watch face from cuff to cuff if you've got multiple ones or something like that. So they work really well. And that's just some 2 ounce or 3 ounce, probably 3 ounce would work best. And then here we'll go ahead and get some of this tooled up, and we'll just go through real quick and just show you tooling of one of these. We're not going to tool all of them on this video, or else it's going to be 4 hours long. So we'll go ahead and just show a little bit of the tooling and die work, and then we'll be ready to start assembling some of these. Okay, these are the liners for the rolled edges, and I'm going to go ahead and dye these brown because I'm kind of doing a two-tone type of finish on that. So we're just going to dye those brown, and that way that's done. They have time to dry before we get to them and start skiving them and trying to fit those. So if you want to do that, just do that early so that that dye has time to dry really good. And here real quick, we're just going to do some light oil, and then we'll antique these. Now I'm just using olive oil like I always use, but just really light coats. It's really thin leather for the most part, so always start out lighter and work your way up to however dark you want. And here we'll just go ahead and use the tan coat, which is my sealer of choice, and we'll use that as our resist for the antiquing. And we'll just give all these a good little bath in tan coat and let them dry really good. And then there's our antique, and I'm using the dark brown Phi Beings paste, and those have been dried for probably an hour, I would imagine, something like that. Just make sure that tan coat's really dry, and then we'll work that antique in there really good and let that set for a few minutes, and then we'll come back and buff it out. And so now that's had time to dry, and so we're just going to buff out any excess, and then we'll come here and put the final coat of tan coat on, which will bring back that original color and luster that we had before the antique paste was put on. Alright, so the first watch band that we're going to put together is going to be the simple lined watch band, and we've already tooled and antiqued, as you just seen, all the watches that we're going to do in this video, the watch bands that we're going to do in this video, but now we're going to put them together individually so you can see the steps. And here I'm just edging and slicking where the folds are going to be. So anywhere it's going to fold around a buckle or around the hangers, I want to go ahead and get those edged and slicked now, and that way they can dry for just a minute, and then we can dye those edges because they're harder to dye once you obviously put a buckle in the way. So I try to, anytime I'm building anything, if there's a fold, I go ahead and edge that and slick it and then dye it if we're going to do dyed edges. And that way that's already done. And then when we go to assembly, all we've got to do is sand and edge the areas in between buckles or D's or whatever else is going on. And so now we'll go ahead and skive this little bottom area here. We just want to bring that down to a long soft feather to where when we fold that over and put our liner over the top of it, doesn't create a bump. So that's really all we're doing. You don't have to take off a lot, just take it down to 0 at the edge, and that'll make that a nice transition once we put the liner on there. And then here I've got just a little cup of dye. Those have had time to dry for a little bit, and so we're just dyeing those edges. Like I said, just a lot easier to do that now without a buckle in the way. Alright, so there's our buckle. That buckle's from Rockin' Out Hardware, and there'll be a link in the description if you want to grab some buckles like that. It's got a copper and a silver. And then there's also our adapters. Now we're going to put some glue there in the fold, and we're going to go ahead and glue our buckles and our adapters in there. Go ahead and get all that glued up and folded and ready for our liners. And so I'm just going to use one coat. If your leather, if it doesn't seem real sticky, you might use 2. But there I was able to get by with 1. So, and the pattern's got a mark for the fold, and I always just kind of put a dot right there. So I know that's where it needs to actually fold. And that way it's always the same size, because sometimes you can screw up your sizing a little bit if you don't fold it in the exact same place. And so we'll get that adapter fit on there and then fold that over. Now I'm not wetting this. Usually when I fold something around a D or a buckle, I usually like to wet the fold area. I'm not doing that here because that leather's thin enough and it felt good enough. Just use your judgment, especially if you're using like a chap leather. You probably won't need to wet it at all. It'll be fine, but on that veg tan, sometimes it'll try to crack. So just be mindful of that. It might not hurt to put a little bit of water just with a dauber right there in that fold, so when you fold it, it doesn't crack. And there's our adapter there, and I'm just going to use a rub stick to push that down tight, and that way it gets stuck really well. And then we'll do the same on the other side. Now when you put those on, my adapter in particular has got that silver little spot right there on one side, then the other side in the middle it's black. The silver one goes to the back, so just kind of be mindful there, because it won't latch in the watch when you slide it in. That silver one won't latch. So, or the silver one will latch, but it's supposed to latch on the back side of the watch. Alright, so now we've got our liners, our two 3-ounce liners that we cut out at the beginning. And so now what we'll do is we'll just take a pair of scissors and cut a nice little straight top on there right quick. So we've got something to work with. And on the billet side, it's really easy, just kind of line it up. And I just give it a little bit of spacing as far as I think I can get with my machine to sew it. And that way I'm sure to sew the edge down. And then we'll take a pencil and just make a mark on that top edge. I'm just trying to make sure I've got plenty of feather and everything. And we'll just make a mark right here, and that'll just give us a line up for our liner. Alright, so here I just like to take my skiver and just skive a nice feather on the top edge of that liner right there. You don't have to go far, just want to make it to where there's not a bump, where there's a nice transition into that fold. And then you kind of usually got, on that thin stuff especially, you got some little debris right there that you can't get off. Just take a lighter, real lightly, just burn that, and it'll burn it right off. That works on anything, old tins or whatever. You can just burn those little hairies off, get little hairs, and you can't get it super clean sometimes. Just take a lighter and just real lightly. Don't burn too long because it'll singe the edge and it'll look bad. And so here we'll go ahead and make a mark the same way as we did on the other side with our pencil, and then we'll make a mark on the buckle side as well, so that we've got two line-up marks as far as where that's supposed to sit in there. And then here we'll do the same thing as far as skiving the edges. That just makes it so much more smooth on the inside, and you don't have a bump there. If you'll just kind of feather that off, and then it'll glue down nicely, and you'll stitch over it a lot easier too. You can see we're just burning that off real quick. Doesn't take much. And so now we'll go ahead and put glue on all the pieces. Remember to use your line-up marks that you made on the bodies in those fold areas. Don't get glue past those. And I did one coat on this. Again, you could do two. Just feel your leather. You know, it depends on if it's just sucks up the glue or not or whatever. But this didn't work too bad, so I was able to get by with one coat. And then we'll just glue those in place and hammer them down, and we'll be ready to sew them. And so here we're going to go ahead and get our craft tool groover, and we're going to just groove those. I use the other groover that I use is a Horseshoe brand, but it is for stitching with 207 type thread. We're going to be stitching this up with size 92 thread on my Singer 3115. Now when you run that groover, try not to mess up like I did there. It kind of got off, but we'll edge that off, so it's not that big a deal. But that little groover sometimes can be cantankerous. Just doesn't, that guide piece that you ride along the outside isn't quite long enough, so sometimes you slip off of there and make a mark where you don't want it. So here we'll sew these up really quick. Alright, so we got all our thread cut. Now we're going to go ahead and trim that liner, just trim straight to the body piece. Again, anytime I'm building anything that's lined, almost always I will leave some feather, and that just kind of ensures that you can trim right up to that body after you sew it, and you won't have any gaps. Everything's lined up perfectly. You're not trying to line up 2 3/4 inch wide pieces of leather and glue them together. You know, cut one an inch, cut 1 3/4 of an inch. It's a lot easier to line those up. And then we'll get those sanded, slicked, or sanded, edged, and slicked, and then dyed. Now I'm edging these with a Berry King number 2. I've got Ron's edgers are the ones that I mainly use, but that little Berry King number 2 works really well on kind of a little oversized too, and I think it's that way because I've sharpened it so many times. But I just like that one for certain applications. So, but any edge will work. Just that's the size that I'm using is around a number 2, and that's plenty for that thickness of leather. And so here we'll go ahead and get our edge slicking done. That's just water and glycerin saddle soap and elbow grease. So we'll go ahead and get that going. If you haven't seen our video on slicking edges, we do have one. I'll try to put a link down in the description to the slicking edge video, and you can check that out. But we'll get all these edges slicked and they'll be ready for dye. Alright, got us a little cup of black dye here, and we're just going to go ahead and dye our edges. And I'm just using the Pro Oil dye. I don't use edge coat or any kind of edge paints or anything like that. I just slick my edges, let them dry, and then dye them with dye. You use much less dye. It's a lot easier to control, and you get a lot better finished edge in my opinion. So that's just how I do it. Now after they've had time to dry on these, I'll take a little paper towel and just kind of wipe off any excess dye residue. Black is bad about leaving a little bit of a residue, and so before we hit it with a coat of tan coat on those edges, I want to go ahead and wipe off any excess with a paper towel just to ensure that it's nice and clean, since it's going to be on your wrist. Don't want any of that to show up. And so we'll just seal it off with one final coat of tan coat. Alright, and so now we're going to punch our holes in our billet end. If you purchase a pattern pack, you will get hole spacing as far as where I'm putting these holes. It's really not that crucial. I think I did them 3/8 apart, and I used the number 2 squeeze punch there to punch those holes. And so now we'll kind of just check to make sure everything looks right. Now all we've got to do on this one is to build a little keeper, and we'll show you how I do that next. Okay, so I've got a little piece of 3/8. It's actually just a tick over 3/8 wide, 3 ounce. That may be closer to 4, but 3-4 ounce, somewhere around in there. And we'll just wrap that around both pieces so we can figure out how long we're going to need it. And we'll put a cut mark there, and then I want to line that mark up with the next side so we know where to put our glue. And so I'm doing it to where we've got about a 5/8 inch overlap, and that way we get a good overlap on those. I don't like buttoning them up end to end on something like this because you'll see the back side of it. And so since our watch band is two-tone black, we're going to dye that black right quick, give that some time to dry, and then we'll come back here and just kind of skive down those ends. I want preferably a longer taper to a feather, and that way when we overlap these, it'll be smooth all the way, and it doesn't create any kind of big bump or anything in between the watch band and the person's wrist. So we'll just get a nice taper there. We can kind of burn that off again. So now we'll take just a little bit of glue. Remember, we've got a mark on the main piece, a lineup mark, and so we'll go ahead and glue to that lineup mark, and then put some glue on the back side of this since they'll overlap. Then we'll give that glue just a minute to dry, and then we'll glue them together. So now that glue's had some time to get tacky, and so we'll now line up our mark with our overlap there. I'm going to try to make sure that it's lined up really well and it's not kind of cattywampus. And then we'll take a stitching awl and we're just going to make 3 holes. One right there at the end of the overlap, and then basically I split the distance of whatever that overlap is, and so you'll have one in the middle, one on each side, and then we'll use some machine sewing thread to sew that up. So now I've got a smaller harness needle. I can't remember what number it is. I've got a pack of them, but it's just a smaller harness needle. And we'll go ahead and we'll run our thread through, and then we'll pierce the thread a little ways up the line there. And this is nylon twisted thread here for the sewing machine, so it's a little trickier. But you'll pierce that thread so that your needle looks as so. So then you want to pull some of the slack out and pull that piercing towards the eye, and then pull the rest, and then pull that piercing over the eye. What that's going to do is lock your thread onto your needle, so you don't have to worry about your needle sliding off the thread versus just running it through there. And so it's just kind of a hand stitching trick there, proper way to thread a needle for hand stitching. And then we're just going to walk it through the holes, basically going, kind of just weaving it in and out of each hole and then back towards itself, and then we'll tie it off. And 1 round is plenty for this. It's just a little keeper, and so we don't have to get too crazy and overbuilt with it. And if you have those staples, you're certainly welcome to use those. I guess those work good. I've never had any of those, but I know a lot of guys use them. There is a leather loop staple. I know Weaver sells some, and I would assume they're faster. I've never had any. So I've always, anytime I've got to make leather loops, I've got to hand stitch them. So this is one of the ways that I'll do that. All right, so now we're going to take the buckle side of the watch band off of the watch face. And we're going to try to attempt, now I thought that would slide over that adapter. It did not. So we kind of went down the screw up trail here with that. So we had to end up taking the adapter off. The nice thing with these adapters is there's 2 screws at the very top, and you unscrew those and they pop right off. And so you can actually build your watch bands without adapters. We'll show you that on the next one, how I do that. And then you can just slide those 2 bars and they just line up with each other, and you just slide them into where they would go, and then use the screws to put the top of the adapter back on. And so I was really glad. I saw that when I first looked at them and didn't understand what they were for, but they came in very handy because I almost screwed up here because I would have had to hand sewn the keeper on the actual watch band instead of sewing it and then trying to slide it over, because it would not go over the top of that piece. And so then we'll put it back in the watch band, and this one is completed, and we'll see how it fits and how it buckles up. All right, so now that one went good. Now we're going to try the rolled edge watch band. And so we've got our filler pieces. These are the ones that we did not tool. Same weight. All the leather's pretty much the same weight, all the pieces of this. And so we're going to take those and we're going to glue them in place. But first, what we're going to do is go ahead and skive the area where that filler is not. So if you want, you can sure just set those filler pieces in there and trace around them so that you know where they're going to go for glue in just a few minutes. Or you can also use your pattern to tell you that, however you want to go about doing that. But we'll go ahead and I'm just going to take a dauber with some water and just wet the areas we're going to skive. You could mist it down, but then if you get the filler area wet as thin as that leather is and go to skiving on it and pulling on it, you're going to stretch all that. So I really recommend here that you just use a dauber and just get the areas that you want to skive wet, because that way you're less apt to stretch that thing all out of whack. And be sure that you're using a good sharp razor blade so you're not pulling too much on the whole piece as you're skiving. Just be tender with it. And we don't need to skive a ton. You don't have to get it down paper thinness. We're just trying to skive mainly the edges and then getting it knocked down a little bit to where it'll make that bend as we try to fold it around the filler piece, which you'll see in here in just a minute. And we'll get all of these pieces skived and ready to go for that process. So now our pieces are skived, so what we're going to do is just put glue right there where the fillers are going to go, where those filler pieces are going to be. We'll go ahead and put some glue on that, and then also on the filler pieces, and then we'll let that glue get tacky, and then we'll glue those down in place, and then we'll be ready to start doing the rolled edge portion. Okay, and here I've just got a little scrap piece of cardboard, just so I don't get glue all over my bench top there. And we're going to go ahead and put glue basically all over them. You can leave the glue out of the bend area and just put it where you're going to want to fold it. But basically we're going to put glue on the body, the folded edges, all over, so we can kind of get this thing going. Now on these I did use 2 coats, 2 thin light coats. Don't put too much glue on these. I mean, that leather's thin. It's small, like it's not holding a lot of weight, you know. So, but I did do 2 thin coats just to ensure that I got a really good adhesion when we start rolling those edges. So I want it to be nice and stuck good, so that it doesn't fight us while we're trying to do this. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and put this buckle on. Be sure you put the buckle on correctly. It needs to kind of, in your mind, it's going to look like it's going on backwards. But remember, where the liner rolls up over that filler piece, that's going to be the front. And so you want to be sure you got the buckle on correctly. I actually put this buckle on a little incorrectly and had to redo it. So that's why my liner already looks like it's kind of wonky. So now we've got that glued on. So now if you can take a needle, if you don't have the adapters or you want to leave them off until you're done, you can just take a big stitching needle. I think that's like a size 200 sewing machine needle, and put that in there and then glue around that. And that way you've got that spacing through there, and you don't necessarily have to put the adapter on, then unscrew it to take it off, to all that stuff. You can just do that and then switch them out, since they do have those screws that made it nice. So I didn't even put them on this one. And then we'll kind of put a little bit of glue on top of the fold over there for the adapter and the buckle, and we'll give that just a second to get tacky, and then we'll start rolling our edges. Okay, now that's ready to go. So what you want to do is, as you're rolling this, you want to be sure that the first contact is made on the edge of that filler piece. So don't just fold it over and stick it down on the top. Like, roll it up, and then, like I'm doing with that stick, kind of push that up against that filler piece so that you get a good adhesion there on the sides. The top edge is going to roll easy. We want to be sure that we're stuck on the sides of that little thin filler piece, because that's going to make sure that the whole width is correct. If you don't do that, you can get kind of a misshapen edge around there, because it's not really stuck up against the edge of the filler. And then once you get that stuck, then you can just work your way down. The buckle side's fairly easy, because it's just a straight run pretty much as far as the fold. And so we'll just fold that down and get that glued really well, and then we'll hammer that down and move on to the billet end. Okay, so now here we are with the billet end, and we'll start out the same way. Again, you want to kind of stand that up, push it up against that filler piece there. I didn't really have to use any water for the straight run areas. Now when we get to this tip up here where we've got a rounded tip, we will wet that down. But as far as the straight run, you pretty much just fold that up. As thin as that leather is, it didn't really need to be wet down with water or anything. And so then we'll do the other side and go ahead and get it prepped and stood up and stuck up against the edge of that filler piece really well. So now we're at the tip, and so we'll take our stick and go ahead and get this all glued and even and smoothed out. And on that tip, we want to get it started, get it started, and then I thought about using a spray bottle, and then it's easier if you use a dauber. So we'll use the dauber to just add some water where we need it, because we're going to pleat the tip here. Since it's rounded, we're going to pleat that. And so what you want to do is stand it up all the way around there, just like we would on the sides, and begin to create small pleats. And the more of them and the smaller you can make them, the better this will work. So I like to use a modeling tool or a spoon or an awl or something to get that started, and just go slow. Don't just fold it over and stick it to the top, because you'll work yourself into a corner, and then it's not going to work. So just take some time and just work small little pleats all the way around there, and just try to get them really where they're really tight and they're really bunched up as you go around that tip, and you can begin to smooth that out and get it going and get them all fit in there. It's not going to seem like it will right at first, but if your leather's proper weight and, like I said, you wet it down a little bit, it should work really well actually. Alright, so you can see all of my pleats there, and so now what we can do is we can kind of just push them further and further in towards the middle of the top there, and you can kind of, as you do that, you'll kind of see that you can smooth out those wrinkles along the tip. And you want to push them back fairly far, because you don't want them to be peeking out from underneath the tip of our body piece that we tooled when we stick that on. So you want to push those in as far as you can, and then just try to get them gathered up and smoothed out real nice, and just let the excess, once you're in far enough, that excess can just stick up, kind of group it together like that is there. And we're going to cut that off, and you won't see it anyway. And I apologize, kind of got out of the shot right there, but I was trying to get everything kind of going. But we get once we get the tip done, then we can just take the sides and just fold it over just like we did on the buckle piece, and that part's easy. That's not really a fitting issue or anything like that. It kind of just wants to go there, so that's pretty simple. And then we'll take our wood stick, and I just like to shape the edge to make sure that it's true, you know, it doesn't have a wobble in it. It's stuck all the way around the edge and on the top. And that way, because this thing's got to go through a buckle that's a certain width too, so 3/4 of an inch. So you got to be sure that you're not changing that when you do the rolled edge. So like I said, a little bit more challenging, but worth the challenge, I think. And now we want to get us a nice sharp razor blade, and be careful not to cut where you're not going to be able to cover it with the body. So you just want to be tender with it here and cut that group of pleats off, that big bunch. You just want to cut it off smooth, and then if you need to, you can grab your skiver. Again, be careful, because you can get that outer edge when you nick it, and now you're going to see it because the body's not going to cover it. So you just want to skive right where those pleats are all stacked up, and so that can be kind of tricky. So whatever way you could do that and be the safest is good. And then we'll take our hammer and just tap that down a little bit and make sure that it's all glued down well and smooth, because we don't want a big bump there at the tip of that watch band. And you can see there how that worked out. Now that looks on the back side. Okay, so now we can take our body pieces that we've already tooled, dyed, and antiqued, and now we can just check them for fit. If we did everything correctly, they should fit fine. You shouldn't have had any stretch with that painter's tape, and so everything should fit correctly. Just want to check to make sure. And so see how that'll cover those seams and the pleats and all of that. And so what we'll do is we'll go ahead, and I'm not going to edge these or slick them right now. That's really thin, like I said, 3 ounce or so, 2-3 ounce, and I didn't want to try to edge that. Sometimes it ends up looking worse than if you just left it alone. But once we get it glued onto the actual watch band pieces, we'll be able to edge that, and we'll show you that here in just a minute. And it worked out really well. But here we'll just put glue on, and I did do 2 coats on this as well, just because I don't want that sliding around when I'm sewing it. And I actually did get the tip of the billet side did slide on me just a little bit, and it might have just been I didn't have enough glue in that one spot or something, but it did try to move. And so you don't want them moving, because you don't have a whole lot of variation in there as you're sewing these. You've kind of got to stay in position there. So two coats I would recommend for sure when you're doing these. Okay, so now we're going to take our hammer, we're going to tap all these in place so they're nice and stuck. Be sure you don't tap your bend area down, because we've got to get an adapter in there. So as you see, we've still got that hole through there. We've got a space available for the adapter. So when you're tapping that on, just be sure you don't just smush that down, and then if you got any glue there and it's glued down, it's going to be hard to get that adapter in there. So now we'll go ahead and sew this, and again, I'm sewing this on 3115. That's more than enough machine to sew watch bands. It actually does a really good job on them, so that's what we're sewing this on. But again, you could buck stitch these or hand sew them. That would work fine too. And Cobra's Class 20 would be a great machine to sew these on too. If you're looking for a really good flatbed machine, I would highly recommend that. These little singers are great, but as far as a machine that's versatile, I would go with the Class 20 over one of these. Well worth the investment. Now we'll go ahead and cut these stitches, get rid of those, and burn any down that may be a little long or something. I try to cut them usually down in the groove so they're kind of hidden. Now I'm going to take a number 2. That's a little number 2 edger, and number 1 would probably be more than enough, but I used a number 2 because it's all I've got. I don't have a number 1. And now it's much easier to edge that because it's up on thicker leather, so you can kind of get that edger up off the rock, and now you can get a nice clean edge, and it's sewn down to something stiff so that it's not moving on you. And so those are just awesome things that go into using hand tools. Everything's got to kind of be in its place, or else things just don't work well. And I found that edging this after it was on was really good. Now we're not going to be able to dye the edges, but we will be able to slick them. And so I'm going to go ahead and just wet that, and just like I would if it was a bare edge, you know, I'm just going to kind of put some water on there. No soap or anything. I'm just going to use water, and then we'll just rub that down with our slicking rag and just get that nice and smooth, and that way it looks like it's got a nice transition into that nice rolled edge there. And that's what I did on that, and it looks really nice. Alright, so that's both our pieces. Now with this rolled edge, you want to be sure and run it through that buckle. Make sure that it fits. Again, sometimes when you roll them, it'll change the width on you, and if it does, and it's too big for the buckle, there's not a whole lot you can do about it at that point. So be sure you're kind of watching that. So now I'm just giving them one little light coat of oil. Remember, the liner piece we hadn't oiled yet. It had just been dyed. And so now I want to go ahead and give it a little coat of olive oil, just real light. And even though the other pieces have been antiqued, it's not going to hurt them at all to oil them. That's why I use tan coat. Once they get a chance to soak in a little bit, then we'll give them one last final coat of the tan coat, and that'll bring back the luster and the brightness in the leather, and give them a little bit of resistance. And now I've taken another piece of that same material that we used for the keeper, which is a little over 3/8 wide 3-ounce, and I went ahead and dyed it brown. And so now we'll go ahead and make the keeper for this the exact same way we did in the simple lined watch band. And we'll go ahead and get all this measured up, adjusted, and we'll get this one sewn up, and we'll be ready to slip it on. So now, since we haven't put our adapters on this one yet, this keeper slides on much easier. So again, I would recommend leave your adapters off till you get that keeper on, or if you don't mind hand sewing the keeper with it around that leather already, that's fine too. Then we'll go ahead and put our adapters on. We got another set of adapters here, and they just separate, slide the little bars into our area that we saved for those, and then we'll screw that plate on, and we'll be ready to slip those on the watch. And so now we'll add our holes here on our billet end. Again, that's on the pattern pack, about 3/8 inch apart, and then we'll buckle it in. Fits really nice. It's actually one of my favorite ones of the three. That is my favorite one of the three that we did. I like the rolled edges. I think you could even go thinner on the liner pieces and the filler piece and make it even just a little bit classier. Now we'll do the cuff style, and I really like the cuff style as well because it's got a lot of room for tooling. The big hole for the watch face kind of gets in the way, but other than that, we've got a lot of room for some artwork, so that makes it fun. And so here I'm going to go ahead and use the number 5 and punch again, like we said before, anytime you've got a corner. So we're going to punch a number 5 hole in each corner of the square hole, and this will just make it much easier to cut that square hole out of there without chancing it, tearing over time or just not looking correct. It's a lot easier. So once I punch those holes, I'll go ahead and take a pencil and just connect the holes with a line, and that way you kind of know where to cut and where our cut line is going to be. So we're just kind of doing that. Now it is drawn on there from my pattern, but by the time we've tooled and antiqued and everything, it's kind of getting faint. So we want to go in there and make sure we know exactly where those lines are, and we'll go ahead and give a rough idea of where the bag punches are, or the slot punches that we need to cut out. Now the slot punch has a 3/4 and a half is what I used. So here we've got a little piece of liner. It's just a little piece of 3/4, and we're going to go ahead and line that. And that's 3/4 ounce. And so we'll go ahead and line that. Glue, I did 1 coat again here. You can do 2. Just judge your leather, see how much you think you need, depending on how tacky it feels. For some reason, some leather just tends to soak up that glue much easier than another leather, even from the same shipment. So you got to kind of make a judgment call there. And once it's gotten tacky, we'll go ahead and glue that down. And we're going to wait to cut that square hole in the middle. We're going to wait to cut that out until after we've sewn this together, and that way we can cut the body and the liner at the same time. It saves you on sanding, saves you a lot of headaches. So just wait to cut that out until after you've sewn this up. So we'll go ahead and sew this up on a little singer again, and we'll be ready to roll. Got rid of all those threads, and then we'll cut that feather off there and go ahead and get that all trimmed up. And then we'll sand. We're going to go ahead and sand and edge and all that. And I'm going to edge it with my number 2. Again, I'm going to use the little Berry King, mainly just because it's kind of, like I said, it's been sharpened a few times, so it's actually like a 2.5, I guess. But it's working really well on these watch bands, so that's the one I'm using. And then we'll go ahead and slick that. Okay, so now I'm going to take my number 5 again. I'm going to go ahead and punch those same holes now through the liner. Now you could have done just 1 punch at this stage. That's fine too. I just did it early just so I didn't forget. But yeah, I want to go ahead and punch that, and then we'll take our trim knife and we're going to go up through one of the holes, and then be very careful to stay on the line and to cut towards the next hole and to keep that straight. However you find the easiest way to do that, go for it. This is just how I found works better for me. You need to be real careful because you don't have a lot of that knife in there because it is such a little hole. So you just want to kind of be mindful. But if you've got an easier way to cut that out, definitely use that. Certainly don't want anybody trying to do it my way if it's more dangerous for you. But that's how I'm going to cut that out, and then we'll work on sanding that up and getting that square hole kind of nice and shaped up. Okay, so now I just took a flat bastard file, and I just wrapped some emery cloth, some coarse emery cloth on there, and that'll give us a nice flat surface that'll fit in that square hole to where we can sand that out. That's a trick. Anytime you got straight lines, you know you need something flat so that it gives you a nice firm surface to sand. If you were just in there with your thumb and sandpaper, you can get that hole off to where it's got a wave in it. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and groove around my hole, and I'm going to sew it. You do not necessarily have to. If you would prefer not to sew around that hole, the square hole, I think it would be fine. I debated about it for a little while, and I decided to go ahead and do it because I have the ability to with the little sewing machine. If you don't have a sewing machine, or you just don't want to fool with sewing around that hole, I think it would be fine, honestly. I don't see it causing any issues if you glue it down good, especially if you're using 2 coats. But so use that information however you will. If you want to sew it, sew it. If you don't, I don't see why it would matter. I don't think anything would ever happen with it. It's a watch band, so you could definitely cut that part out if you don't want to take the time to do that, especially if you're hand stitching it. That's just one less thing to have to worry about hand stitching. So now I'm edging that with, again, with that number 2 Berry King, but as you can see, it's missing those corners, right? And so this is where the Ron's edgers will come in really handy, and this Berry probably did a good job of it too before it was sharpened for so long. But with a new edger, this Ron's here will just pop those corners right out there. It'll edge right up into that corner, and so that's really nice. Because the Berry, like I said, the Berry King will do that too when it's new. Mine's kind of wore out. I've sharpened it so many times that just those legs are too long and it just can't get in there. So it's definitely not a deal with Berry's tool. It's just mine tool. It's not. It's been sharpened so many times. It's just not very good at the corners anymore. So, but we'll go ahead and get that all slicked up. Okay, so now we're here at the punch bench. We're going to take a 3/4 inch bag punch, or a 3/4 inch oblong punch, and we're going to do one on each side of that square hole. Then we're going to do 2 1/2 inch bag punches, and that's going to make the little slots where these hangers will weave through. And so I've got a 3/4 and then 2 1/2 inch. You could definitely do, if you wanted to change those hangers up, might look pretty cool to do like a 3/4, 1/2, and a 1/4 inch, but you know, it'd be kind of hard to weave it through there, so I think 1/2 and 1/2 is good. But we'll go ahead and punch those holes. Alright, so now we'll go ahead and put our snaps in there, and I've got the holes marked on the pattern pack so you'll know exactly where they go. It's not that crucial, but just try to get them centered and right off the edge there. And so we're going to go ahead and set these with a Berry King snap setter for these big line snaps. And I got that from Aaron at Maker's Leather Supply, and I've got 2 different sizes, and they're really handy for setting those snaps. We've posted about it a little bit on our social media, and they're really handy because those little snaps can be kind of a booger to set. But we got those set, and now we'll come over here and we just need to punch a 3/4 inch bag punch in those hanger pieces, and that's really all there is to those. And we'll be ready to kind of get this thing wrapped up. We're going to dye the edges right quick since we haven't done that, and we'll go ahead and dye those dark brown to match the rest of it. And then we'll put one last coat of tan coat on there just to brighten everything up, seal off those edges, and wrap her up. So now we've got our pieces for our watch face to hold it in, and so what we'll do is we'll come up from the bottom in one of them and then shove that through the bigger hole there. You'll kind of see how this works, but as you go down that first 3/4 inch slot, you'll actually come through the 3/4 inch slot that we put in the hanger piece. And so that'll lock it down, and then we'll come up through the next one and down through the next one after that. So that'll give us kind of a weave effect on the band, and it's decorative, but it's also holding the watch face in place. And so that really locks it down well. We'll go ahead and look at that. You can take the scissors there and cut that little bit of excess off. If it's a little bit too long with some of those hanger pieces, you can go ahead and trim some of that off. But now the watch sensors are exposed to the wrist of whoever's wearing it. And I think that weave there, just the way it's going through those bag punches, it'll never, the watch face can't come off at that point. It's pretty well locked in. And that's our cuff style right there. And you could certainly change the shape of it if you wanted to do something a little bit shapier, a little different or something like that. But the basic concept's there. And I think it's a really neat way of accomplishing that. Alright guys, so that's our video on making the Apple Watch Band. Real quick, we're going to talk about sizing. On the pattern pack, if you do get that, on the one of the first patterns on there, which is just the simple, what I call the simple lined watch band, I have kind of a cut line or squiggly line on there. That's where you can add or take away from the center of each of these straps. So you'd want to do, add here, basically just to spread it in or out to make it either smaller or longer. What I figured out as far as the sizing, like I said, this is based on the medium large by Apple. So this watch band here, which is the athletic band, it's just a medium large. They have a small medium and a medium large. I wear the medium large, and so I based the patterns in the pattern pack off that medium large to center this buckle for me. And so my wrist is about 8 inches if it's loose, and I don't like mine real tight, so it's kind of loose. So if you do like a soft tape around somebody's wrist, you can just have maybe the tip of your finger underneath that tape. That'll give you some spacing. Don't pull that tape really tight around their wrist unless they want it that tight. But basically, the easiest way I figured out to do it is to figure out, so your watch face, basically 1.5 inches tall. So the watch face is 1.5 inches. So basically, you would take whatever that wrist measurement is, take off 1.5 inches, and that's what your measurement needs to be from this end to this end. And don't count the hangers, okay? We can use a little bit of play in these in case we're off a little bit, so don't use the adapters, in your measurement. Just measure from the bend to bend, kind of like we would on a belt, but here we're counting for the buckle in the middle, and we have to because it's coming around and we want that all centered. And so I tried to come up with some easy way that was like our belt measurements and getting a size off of somebody's belt measurement in order to figure out cut length. And I couldn't come up with something that was clear enough. And so basically what I would do is, if you're wanting to make this smaller or larger, kind of it'd be handy, I guess, to make a jig, say add another 1.5 inches or so on here, and then put a bunch of holes in it and burn a set of adapters, just put them on here. And that way, if somebody wants a watch band, You can put the adapters, you have the adapters already on your jig type watch band, and then you can put it on them and get them to tighten it where they like to wear it. And then you can even number all those little holes, and that way you know exactly what hole they're in, and then you can make your pattern off of that. The tooling patterns that are in there, there's 6 patterns for each style of watch band. There's 3 styles in this video. So you've got the one like this that's got the rolled edges, and then you've got just a simple lined watch band, and then the cuff. And all 3 of those have 6 patterns each for the tooling. Now if you shorten or lengthen the pattern, you're going to have to kind of adjust the tooling patterns to fit that. Shouldn't be that big a deal from a small, like say a young lady's watch band that's going to have a really small wrist down up to a big burly man with a big old wrist. You're still only going to be talking 3/4 of an inch, maybe something like that, maybe an inch. So it's not a ton of difference there in the tooling pattern, so you should be able to kind of make that work. But that's the best way I figured out on the sizing, is just figure your watch face, which is going to be around 1.5 inches, take that off their wrist measurement, and then you can figure out from here to here what that total length of the watch band needs to be. Like I said, I think the handier thing would be just to make a jig. If you're doing a lot of these, just have a little watch band jig that you can slap on their watch face. And that way, if that changes a little bit or something, you know, they can put that on. So that's where I would wear it right there. And then you can pick what number hole they're in. And then when they leave, you can use that jig to kind of figure out how long to make each piece of this. So that's my attempt at making a watch band. Like I said, I'm not a watchmaker. That's actually the first time I've ever tried to make a watch band. They're not super hard, just for me and my schedule. It's really hard to kind of work that kind of stuff in, so we kind of stay away from it and always have. But for you guys that make a lot of them, there is a lot of people that want them, and so it's a really good item, especially if you don't have a whole lot of room for a bigger shop. You know, making smaller items, it's just great because you really don't need a big huge shop and space and all that kind of stuff to really have a good little side business making stuff like that. So the watch band, if you are working on smaller items or just looking for a nice little smaller item to offer at Christmas time, this is a great one, because there's so many people that wear some type of smartwatch, like an Apple Watch or something like that. And I'm sure you could probably use these on just a normal watch as well. If you had just a regular watch face or something like that, you can sure come up with those. So they are great little gift items, and so hopefully you can put those to use. So if you're wanting these buckles, Rocking Out Hardware is where you want to get them. You can look them up on Facebook. They have a really good Facebook page, and then you can also look on their website and get that. We'll put links down in the description on how to get these buckles if you want them. As you saw in the video, there's a copper one and there's silver. And I really like them, and they're super affordable, and they look really nice. So check those out. And then, like I said, as far as the adapters, I don't know, you guys that make a lot of these watch bands probably have a better source than I did. I just got them off Amazon. Maybe that's where you're getting them. But even off Amazon, they weren't expensive. I think they were under 10 bucks as far as I can remember. And so they work out really well. I'll put a link on our website to the ones that I used in this video. But they seem good. They seem like they'll work fine. So I'm going to order some more, because now my wife wants one of these. So I've got to order some more accessories to get her one made. So, but if you want the pattern pack, links down in the description. You're more than welcome to grab that up. Be sure and subscribe to this channel, and if you haven't already, be sure to go to our website at dgsaddlery.com and sign up for the Leathercraft newsletter, and we'll see you guys in the next video.